All right, here we are live on this beautiful Thursday. It's good to be here, good to be on YouTube, and it's good to be able to talk to you guys today. And I want to talk about something that I believe is very, very important, and that is something that a lot of people are scared to death of, and that is when you talk about religion and politics. So many people are scared to death, to discuss or to talk about those two things. They don't want to mix those two things. They want to they run from it, to be honest with you, and which is not good. And so I want to make sure that my live stream is working good. Good. I think that we're working good on there on YouTube with the volume. But that's what I want to discuss tonight. I want to talk about this very thing, politics and religion. So many people are, they get scared to death. They talk about separation of church and state, and we got to keep the the church out of the state's business, and the state needs to stay out of the church's business. And I agree wholeheartedly with the fact that the state needs to stay out of the church's business. But I do not agree with the fact that the people of the church, the body that the body needs to stay out of the states. I think that we are to be very much engaged in what's going on, in our government. So many places and so many people are they're not engaged, they're not informed, and I think that it's just not good. And so I pray that I hope, and my prayer is that everybody, all Christians and all churches, will get involved and will get engaged, especially in the area of prayer, in praying for our states and praying for those that are elected, and praying for our elected officials. And I believe it's very, very important that we are not just praying for them, but that we are letting them know, communicating that to them. Of course, there's lots of things, that we want to see happen, a lot of things that we want to see come into play, and, some good policy, passed. But at the end of the day, the most important thing, in the involvement of a Christian is prayer, and praying for our elected officials and praying for our country. And so I think that is of utmost importance. And so I just want to encourage all of you, especially those of you that are watching this video, that you need to be involved in praying, for our country. And very, very important. I would encourage you to spend, several minutes a day, pray. It doesn't take long. And call out your elected officials to God and praying for them. So many times as Christians, we want to complain about what's happening and what's going on. But at the end of the day, we are to be praying as well. And so that's what I want to talk about for just a few moments, is what I believe, is the Christian's role. Should a government official go speak out of church? I have zero problems with a government official going and speaking out of church, whether it's campaign season or not campaign season. Our churches are supposed to be a bedrock of our community. And when you look at our churches, we have a lot of people in these United States of America that go to church every single Sunday. And so that's where a large, group of people are at already. They're at church. I have no problem with a government official going and speaking at a church, whether it's campaign season or not campaign season. I would encourage them to go. Even if you don't get up and speak behind the podium, at least go to where the people are at, so the people can talk to you and ask you questions. Somebody says, well, the church ain't the place for that. I disagree. I think the church is a very good place for that. It's a very good place for an elected official or someone running for office to stand in the foyer and to talk to people as they come in and as they leave church, and they can get, questions asked. And I think it's very important. I think it's very good. I think it's good for the pastor to be connected, to those elected officials. I think it's good for the congregation to be connected. And let me just say this: whenever an elected official does come to your church, that is not the time to ream them out. That is not the time to give them your 10,000 grievances that you have against the government. That's not the time to let them know about that one vote that they made, that wasn't a good vote. That's not the time for that. Whenever they come to our churches, that is a time, number one, to pray for them. And number two, that's a time to just meet them and encourage them. And if they get up and speak, for 3 or 4 minutes, I think that's great. But at the end of the service, I think it's good to have time where the men or the women come around and pray, for those that are elected. And that is a time to lift up their hands. And I don't think that we do that enough. So many times, and I have been the world's worst at this, and that is getting on social media and just blasting, our elected officials, and and I guess there's a time and a place for that, and I'm trying to learn as I get older. But my point is, there is a time and a place maybe there is a time and a place to let them know your grievances. There is a time and a place to let them know the votes, that they shouldn't have taken. But church, when they come to your church, that's not the place for that. That is a time to encourage them, pray for them, talk to them about good policy that you want to see enacted. That is not the time to just load them up, with complaints. That's not the point. That's not the time. And I'll just say this to the elected officials. I would encourage you, to attend and go to churches. And whether it's Sunday morning, Sunday night, whether it's a men's Bible study on Saturday, no matter what it is, attend the church, revival meetings, attend the church, get to know the pastor, get to know those people in the community. Let them know that you're available to them. And I would encourage pastors and deacons and leaders of our churches to invite our elected officials to come. Get engaged and get involved. I think it's very, very important. So that is one way, that we as Christians can be involved and get engaged is by praying for them, having them come to your churches. I'm going to tell you another way that we can be involved and engaged is taking them to lunch. Having lunch with your elected officials, having coffee with them, and just call them up or shoot them a text message, send them an email. And this is better local. It's really going to be hard, to go have lunch with Senator, Sidney Hyde-Smith or Senator Roger Wicker. They're both in D.C. They get to come home not much. It's going to be very hard, to go have lunch with them. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to have lunch with the governor. It's going to be hard. I had a great privilege the other night, to sit down with our governor, and have a dinner with him. And that's just not going to happen, too often to where you're going to actually sit down and have a conversation, with your governor, with your United States senator, with the lieutenant governor or any of those gentlemen or ladies. That's going to be hard because they're representing the entire state. They do have a lot of people that are trying to contact them. But our state senators and our state representatives, that is back local. And I want to encourage you, take them to lunch, have coffee with them, get one or two people to go with you. And just sit down. And once again, that's not the time to load them up and have an hour complaint session. That's just time to get to know them, to build that relationship. And I wish that, I would do a better job at this, and I'm going to do a better job at this, just making that connections and that connecting, to our elected officials. So the only time that they're not hearing from you is, oh, no, here comes Dan again, or Dan's texting me again, or Dan's calling me again. And, what is he complaining about this time? I don't want them, any of my elected officials, I don't want them to have that type of attitude that whenever I'm calling them, it's like, oh, Lord, what does Dan want today? But they look forward to if I call them or text them. In the past, in some cases, maybe they haven't been, but I know there's a few that we have a really good relationship. But anyway, your state senator, state rep, have that opportunity to go sit down, have lunch with them, talk policy. Talk to them. Listen, they did not run to be state senator or state rep to make our state a worse place. They ran because they want to make the district that they serve in a better place. They want to represent the community. Now, I know that there are some, who do it for their own personal gains, and I understand that totally. But I would say for the most part, that's not the case for most, at least not in Mississippi. Most of our elected officials here, I would say 99.9% of them, that we might disagree on how to make something happen. We might disagree on policy or on issues. But for the most part, they want to see Mississippi flourish. They want to see Mississippi grow. I think about Louisiana. I pastor in Louisiana. I've been able to meet a lot of elected officials in Louisiana. There's one gentleman in particular that I'm trying to help, as he's running for the House seat. And he's a good man. We do not agree whenever it comes to religion or even the Bible, but we agree on many principles that we hold dear to our hearts as Republicans. And so we're trying to help him get elected. There's things that we're trying to do, and to get him, whenever he had his kickoff party, he invited me to come and pray, and it was such a privilege and an honor, as a newly voted in pastor, to be able to go and to have prayer. I'll text one of our elected officials today in Slidell, one of our councilmen, and we're having a meeting tomorrow night in Slidell with teenagers. We'll have 300 teenagers there, and I invited him to come and to speak to the group and speak to the teenagers, and I'm hoping that he's able to make it. And if he does, we're going to have preachers surround him and pray for him and lift up his hands and let him know that there's a church in the community that appreciates him and that is praying for him. And so back to your state senator, state rep, invite them to lunch, invite them to coffee. Remember this, that they don't have a lot of time, and so they're busy just like every one of us are. They're, especially a state senator, state rep, that is a part-time salary. They're not getting rich. Look, I mean, they're making pennies. The amount of money that it takes them to go to Jackson and to represent the people and away from their family. I mean, there's just so much that they're sacrificing for you and I. We don't need to waste their time. We need to, if you're going to have coffee, keep it minimum 30 minutes, lunch 45 minutes to an hour possibly, but just keep it minimum. But just let them know that you appreciate them and try to encourage them. Your city councilman, your aldermen, your supervisors. Those are people. I had lunch today with two men that are newly elected. One's a city councilman right now, and then him and another gentleman are two newly elected supervisors. And I think it's important, to connect with them and to have lunch with them. But it's a position, that you can get to. It's very local. I am concerned at what's going on in D.C. Very much so. I am very much praying that we elect a new president next year. I think it's important at what's going on in D.C., but listen to me very carefully. If we get so focused on D.C., we'll neglect the home base. We need to be focused on what's happening in our cities. We need to be focused on what's happening in our counties. We need to be focused on what's happening right here in our districts, and we need to be focused on what's happening right here in Mississippi. Not just what's going on in Washington, D.C., but home. I believe it's important. So do I believe it's important for Christians to be involved? Absolutely. Do I think you ought to be engaged? Absolutely. Do I think that you ought to invite elected officials to church with you? Absolutely. Now listen, some elected officials, they'll be more than willing to get up behind the pulpit and to talk for 3 or 4 minutes. Now I'm not saying take up the whole service. I'm not for that. The people have come to hear a message, from the Bible, and so maybe let an elected official get up if they have faith. Let them get up, say a word, 2 or 3 minutes, and then let them pray. It'd be great for the people, to hear. We've hosted our governor, more than once at my dad's church, and our governor he's a good man, and he's very unique in one particular area. And I'm not seeing too many, or I've heard of too many elected officials do this. I've hosted a prayer meeting at the governor's mansion with our governor before, and we had a bunch of pastors come, and several pastors prayed, and then our governor said, I want to pray for y'all, and our governor bowed his head and prayed, which to me was very unique, but I loved it, and the pastors there loved it, to hear the governor pray and to call out God and to call out and talk about Jesus, and when the governor come and spoke, he came and spoke at my dad's church, and I was able to host him there, and he got up and spoke, and then whenever he got done speaking, he prayed, and he asked the Lord to bless our state and to bless, our communities, and I thought it was a very good thing, and but some might not want to get up and speak, so don't pressure them, but encourage them to get up and speak. But I think that goes back to that being involved, being connected, to your elected officials. And I think it's so very important. I think you ought to be engaged. I think you ought to be involved. I think you ought to know what's being voted on. Oh, yeah. Come January, they'll be in session, and you need to know what's being voted on. There's bills that affect us every single day. Look, there's a lot of bills in Washington, D.C., but those bills that are in Jackson, Mississippi, those affect us every single day, and you need to know what they are. You need to be tuned in, and of course, there's some things that we're going to be doing to try to help, to keep you informed, and so you know what's going on, whether it's a bad bill or a good bill. There's a lot of good bills, and there's a lot of bad bills, and but I want to know about the good bills and the bad bills, and so we can know what we need to push and what we need to pray against and fight against. But know what's going on in Jackson. Take a trip to Jackson, maybe 1 or 2 sessions. I think it's important, to take a trip and go to the Capitol and meet your elected officials there. Get involved in different grassroots organizations. My favorite grassroots organization is Mary Jo Perry's organization, and she's probably I would say Mary Jo Perry is probably the most organized She has the most organized grassroots efforts in the state of Mississippi, is my opinion. And she does just a phenomenal job. And she's a strong Christian. She has character, integrity. She's got a lot of good people around her that are helping her. And I would involve, she's in Jackson. There are some good ladies on the coast, Miss Julie and others, who are engaged in that, on the coast. And she has ladies all over the state, and men all over the state, that's involved in her organization. And Mary Jo does a phenomenal job. And I would encourage you to get involved in a grassroots organization like that, as well. But every Christian are to be involved. Every Christian are to be engaged. Get engaged, get involved. And the Bible talks about, you go read the story in the Bible. It talks about, tells a story about Joseph. Joseph was involved in government. It tells a story about David. David was involved in government. Obviously, he's the king. Joseph, second in command in Egypt. The Bible talks about Solomon, the man that built the temple. David wanted to build a temple for the Lord, but at the same time, he couldn't because the Bible said that he had too much blood on his hands, but he got it ready for his son Solomon, who built the temple. And so, which is very, very important. But the Bible talks about Solomon. The Bible talks about, it talks about Esther, who was a queen. It talks about Vashti, who was a queen. It talks about, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who was princesses appointed, in different provinces in Babylon. The Bible talks about Daniel, who was put in second in command there in Babylon. I mean, the Bible goes on and on and on. It talks about Moses. And whenever you look at Moses, and whenever his father-in-law come in, and his father-in-law said to Moses, there's some things that you need to do, in order to make, giving counsel a lot better. So he began to divide it up, and so that was just and we got a lot of that, our government, way it's set up, from that and from Moses, and especially our military. But Moses was very much involved in leading people and involved in government. And so the Bible talks a lot about government. The Bible talks about that the people rejoice when the righteous rule. When the righteous are in charge, whenever the righteous are elected officials, the Bible says that the righteous rejoice. It's a good thing for Christians to have Christians elected to public office. And so anyway, once again, I'm just talking about, just a simple thing. Should the church, should the people be involved, in government, talking about, religion, and politics. And a lot of people don't want to mix those two. And I understand. But at the same time, we need to be involved. We've got to be engaged wholeheartedly. So many Christians have walked away, from being involved or being engaged in what has filled the void. The left has filled that void. And so we must, if you've walked away, if you have left from being engaged, I would encourage you to get back engaged in what's happening and what's going on. I think there are several key areas that you need to be involved in and engaged in. Number one, your family. I think you ought to know what's going on in your family, be engaged in your family. Number two, I think you ought to be engaged in your church. I think you ought to attend your church every single time the doors are open. If your church that you go to has church 3 or 2 or 4 or 5 times a week, I think you need to attend church every single time the doors are open, if at all possible. I understand that your jobs and our jobs might not allow us to do that. I get that, but we need to be at church every single time we have an opportunity. So you ought to be involved in your family. You ought to be involved in your church wholeheartedly. You ought to be involved in your work, wherever you work at. Be involved, be engaged, be involved in your community. Get engaged and involved in your community. Be engaged in your government. We are the government. The people are the government. Let's stay engaged in the government. So once again, we're just simply talking about, Christians, being engaged in the political arena. And if you are not engaged in the political arena, I would encourage you to do so. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Please subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. If you know someone that needs to maybe watch this video, copy and paste and share the link. I would greatly appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I pray that you have a great rest of the evening. I know this weekend college football was kicking off. I'm excited about college football, and I can't wait to watch some good football starting tonight and throughout the weekend. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and God bless the great United States of America.